we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening for our Monday night mini teachings. And tonight I am open for questions, and we put it out to the group, but nobody was game enough to actually throw me a question. So Renee has obviously got a bunch of questions that she wants to ask me. So this is where I like to be more interactive as well. Like, I can sit here and be a talking head and just teach, but I would have a preference if you've got questions to be able to answer them, so that it gives some reference to what may be going on in your life, and so I can be most helpful. So moving forward, if you have any questions, reach out, drop them in the group, or send either myself or Renee a message directly. And happy to actually, put you on the hot seat, or even just answer the question during these teachings. So let's go. Renee, what's your question?
So I'm trying to it's very relevant relative to lately. So I'm trying to I'll try and word it properly, and it's more going to be like a comment, I guess, and get your opinion. So my question kind of is on the theme of like resentment, right? And the emotion of resentment. So I have personally always thought of myself not to be a resentful person. And then recently through therapy with my partner, it was brought up that there was actual resentments there that were lingering within the subconscious that were then manifesting as an inability to kind of like communicate. And then, so I've just been kind of pondering on that then, well, like, what is resentment? Like, because I haven't thought of myself to be a resentful person. So is resentment then like just heaps of annoying things that creates like this emotion that you can't control, or is it to do with like subconscious trauma, or like, yeah, like what is the underlying facts of resentment then?
Okay, so can you give me a moment that you actually have been resentful towards your partner, so that I can get some context
Ooh.
around it?
Okay. I guess in moments of me wanting to go one way with a decision and them not wanting to go in that direction. So I guess I'm not getting my way, or something that I think is in alignment with what I want to do, and therefore holding resentment for then holding me back from something that's potentially in alignment with my kind of highest good, or where I should be going, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect.
Oh,
So
was
to
it
break
valid?
it down, like, really, resentment is a byproduct of unrealistic expectations, of a projection upon somebody else to live inside your values, and having an unrealistic expectation for them to actually live inside your authentic axiology. And that's unrealistic, because each person on this planet is an individual. And when we place conditions upon them to live inside what it is that you wish to be, and then we hold them responsible, saying that, oh my God, I can't live my own life because they won't do it with me. That to me is like a victim mentality that is in occurrence. So the resentment then actually perpetuates and becomes a deeper resentment. But in the essence, it starts off with the unrealistic expectations of others to live inside your value system. And, it's a common problem these days, because we are unfulfilled potentially within ourselves. So we look into the outside to have somebody else actually fulfill that. But we won't give ourselves permission to actually live authentically to who we want to be, in the fear of either losing something or the actual gain of something. Does that make sense? Any questions on that further?
So my question then, I guess, rolling on from that, hopefully I'm not going to segue you too much, is then in the element of, say, it could be not even just a partnership, but a friendship or another kind of like tight relationship. If you've got two people that have completely different axiologies and values, then how would you then maneuver the two of them if you are going in the other? Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't have unrealistic expectations of someone to meet your axiology or you theirs. So how does that then work? Or does it not work? Or can it work?
Well, it can work. It's just simply about opening up our prefrontal cortex so that we can actually objectify that which is what we want to have to come into creation, right? And by simply asking the question of how is that person or my partner, my friend, my colleague, etc., living authentically inside their axiology, which is their intrinsic form of value, how is that actually being of service to me and mine, right?
Mm.
And we can also ask the question, like, what benefits am I gaining by this particular person living or exhibiting or expressing their form of value, and how does it complement mine, right? Because in reality, when we have two people that are the same, the universe doesn't need two people that are the same. And so in the essence, most relationships are utilitarian because most partners actually are in a duality, and they're actually making a whole. So when we can see the value of our partner, person, friend, colleague living authentically to who they are, then, and we ask ourselves those simple questions: how is this person being of service to me in that form? What is it actually providing to me in the essence of my values? Like, how does it complement me? So we shift the dynamic of our thinking to the opposite of what we've been trained to actually do, right? So coming back to in the essence of resentment, and is that caused by trauma or those particular things? Really, it's caused by our subordinations to our belief systems that we've actually grown up with, and our teachings or our trainings that we've grown up with, to have an expectation on others to do as they're told, right? So, or to be in some form of value to you. But realistically, to have a relationship that is going to actually last the distance in what I call unconditional, is to honor the person that you're with, your partner, your friend, your colleague, in their intrinsic form of value, right? So that's probably, I can see your mind's trying to conceptualize that, because it's also bringing up an element of a feeling. So if I can ask you, what feeling is that is arising?
I don't know, like nearly like I nearly start thinking, my mind was just going like, but then like, what about like boundaries and stuff though? Like at what point is it like, well, these are just my boundaries and like they're like my limitations, or vice versa? Do you know what I mean? It's like, is it, because I know it's like one thing to be like, how is this person's complimenting and like see the opposing force in that, but then it's also like, well, this is actually just like what I need in terms of a boundary for self. So then how does that then play into that?
Well, when we're looking for somebody else on the outside to actually fix that for us, then we're also abdicating self-responsibility and accountability to them to take care of that. But when you can be totally in alignment and in deep connection with self, and not requiring anybody else to actually compliment or to give you anything, we call that the art of unattachment, is that from that space, we don't need boundaries, right? The universe is boundless. And when we actually look at our intrinsic nature, and we start to understand that we are boundless beings with anthropomorphic projections of boundaries placed upon us and how we should be living, that can creates the perception of constraint in our own mind. But when we can actually open up our minds in full objectivity and actually look at our true nature of who we are as natural beings, we are boundless. And it's coming into our mastery of our intelligence to be able to ask these deeper questions and transform or transcend from our lower animal mind into our higher mind, or a transcendental mind, or our higher mind, objective mind, prefrontal cortex, which takes us into the soul, and look at it from that perspective. And inside that space of unconditional love, there isn't any boundaries. To me, unconditional love, or love, has no opposite. So there is nothing to push against it. because there is no restraint, there is no restrictions, there is no limitations. It is boundless and open, and it is all potential, right? So
Just gave me chills.
and so inside of that, when we can start to actually start to see from a different layer, and one of the beautiful things that I like to say is that where is the opposite also true, right? And then when we start asking that question, we open up and expand our awareness and expand our consciousness into all possibilities. When we start to actually put expectations or boundaries and constraints upon something, that tells me that that's a limited mind that is thinking, that's also operating from a place of fear as well. So we could also look at the resentment is masking fear, which would be the fear of the loss of something or the fear of the gain of something. So if you were to go into those two things, what would it be? The fear of the loss or the fear of the gain of something?
Fear of loss.
Okay. So when we then would go deeper into like, what do you perceive you might lose? Is it the loss of the partner, the loss of the property, the loss of business, the loss of life? What?
Randomly, the loss of myself more.
And okay, so what do you mean by that? Let's go deeper again.
So like this is, and now but like you've just told me all that new information, I'm like, I don't even know. I would have said like the loss of myself for like what I would perceive to have believed is like allowing myself to just take on more what they want to do rather than what I need to do to. Does that make sense? Rather than, so to see things from a higher perspective actually means me like letting go of, I guess, my control, which makes me who I am and whole in order to complement them more. Therefore, I will lose myself, if that makes sense. But then now my mind's getting all scrambled because I'm like, but that's the higher consciousness.
Yeah, now you've entered into the abstract world and you're starting to see like there is possibility of both things happening, right?
Yeah.
And when we can enter into an abstract way of thinking, again, like it will expand all possibilities, but we're having almost like a dichotomy or a dialectic between our high mind and our lower mind. So your lower mind, God, I'm going to lose myself, but my high mind, your high mind is possibly saying to you, well, no, that's not true, right? Because when we go into the realms of all possibility, how can you lose self? Because nothing is ever created nor destroyed. Nothing can ever die. It just changes form, right? All energy is conserved. No energy can be destroyed. So when we start to unpack those specifics, we start to actually open up again our awareness and ask deeper questions and have realizations about, well, is that true? Can I essentially ever lose a part of myself?
Well,
Not really.
no, you
No.
can't. No. And that again is just for in my head, again, it's that fear base of like, oh, but like this is like all I know, this is like my comfort, this is me, rather than that higher mind of like, but it could be something bigger, but you're not going to allow yourself to reach it because of that fear. So yeah.
So the fear is there as what I call a biofeedback mechanism to let you know that you have an imbalanced perception, and it's doing its job. Because it is the lower mind, the animal mind, the limbic system mind, monkey mind, whatever you want to call it. There's so many different names out there. That is alluding you to the feelings in your body, because fear only associates with the feeling in the body. And then when that feeling comes in, our perceptions then want to give it some kind of reference or a name or a label to justify, give some meaning to it, right? And then we start off with a whole dialectic that goes between, oh my God, is that true? Or what? And then we end up spiraling into this revolutionary cycle of ruminating thinking. And then pretty soon we're actually like in a full victim mode or trauma mode or whatever labels you want to give it. But inside of that, if we have a state of presence and we have an awareness to what that feeling is, that we are labeling next to fear, then we realize that it is an imbalanced perception, and we go, oh, great, thanks for the awareness, like fucking thank you, because now you have the opportunity to actually ask the question, like, where is the opposite also true?
Yeah.
And then your prefrontal cortex, your higher mind, will start to actually come into form as well, or into creation, or into substance, and then you'll be able to conceptualize and put the two together, and whatever is relevant or true or for you will then birth. You can see in the background here, like I have these things up called the 6 transcendental feelings. And when we know that we're in a state of balance and a state of balanced perception, and we've entered into a state of grace where we have what I call unconditional love, a feeling of that, where you don't need to change anything relative to what it is. It is as it is, Sat Ta, relative to, the Egyptian constructs. And in the Buddhist constructs, like they call it loving kindness, where that's two components integrated together, where it has no opposite. And then we have gratitude, inspiration, certainty, enthusiasm, and a state of presence. So there's this deep innate knowing within inside of you that you are on the path of who you are. And the change has nothing to do, right? And then that lasts like for a small incremental moment. And then we go into the next void or the next challenge that generally starts to get us to be able to integrate further and further and further again. So as we go through the stages of development, that's why I love resentment. Resentment is there to help you to grow and to ask the questions. I don't ever want to get rid of resentment. Like, I thank it all the time for being there. And the same with anger. It's a beautiful expression to awaken you to a deeper sense of growth and like being a transcendental person, or having a transcendental mind.
Very cool. I've always loved I love like anger, and I love even like all the ones that are like low vibe, because I think they do teach me lessons. But I've always thought of resentment as being like resentment equals victim. So I've just had like this really like morphed idea of what like resentment actually is. So it's definitely been really interesting to unpack that.
There is another component like I would like to add to resentment, and resentment, we could also say, if it has an association of blame to it as well, we could put that inside of that. Then generally, anytime I hear blame or shame or resentment, I know we look at to like, what is the pride that you have? So all prides are balanced by shames or blames. So if you have resentment or blame, then I would also look at where I'd actually had a sense of self-righteousness or pride, that now the universe is actually coming in and balancing you out with resentment or shame, right? So anytime we're up, we have what we call hubris to actually bring us back down into a state of balance. So monitoring our expression of being totally in a state of presence and awareness to our emotional fluctuations and volatilities relative to simple prides and shames, we could just balance out the equation with that. So if you had a self, like a pride around something with your partner that you were heading off into, and you thought you knew a lot more than what he did, and then you're projecting upon him, that has to be balanced by like a shame later on.
Woo! Yay! That's so interesting. It's so good. Thank you so much.
So inside of that, it is having an awareness. And if you also find yourself like deep in shame, then I would be looking at like, where are you also prideful in a certain and having that awareness. So watching when we actually get ourselves into an up, like a prideful state, it's wisdom to actually balance that out and come back to a state of what I call equipoise. And equipoise, we could say, is a state of certainty with gratitude in it as well. And therefore, we're seeing that both sides of the equation are actually never separated from each other. They're constantly entangled. But again, we come back to that we have been conditioned or trained or taught to think that one side is better than the other, that we should constantly be in a state of pride or happiness or joy or, those particular things. Now, that is what the Buddha's core, the Buddhism inside of that is trying to seek their the constant state of seeking, and also trying to source what they call the unobtainables, right? So that enters us into a state of suffering. And that's done by ourselves in there, and by our belief system that we should be in a constant state of happiness. So one of the questions I love to, when I'm teaching, is asking, have you been in a constant state of up happiness your whole life?
Never.
No. In a day, have you been constantly in a state of up?
Probably not.
No.
I don't think it's sustainable energetically.
No,
It's exhausting.
it's not. It isn't. So again, we are human mammalians, but we're also spiritual human mammalians that are here to have an experience relative to nature. And nature has provided us with all these traits and these expressions and emotions to be able to be expressed and to be able to be used. But it's how far we polarize them. And so if we're in a constant state of wanting to be up all the time, then it's absolute law. It's absolute natural law that it has to be balanced out with the downside. Our neurochemistry is designed for that, absolutely designed for that. So when we have an understanding of that, we bring ourselves into that equipoise state, or we stay like in between, like I call the 3-to-4-1 ratio of volatility in our emotions. That's where we start to actually sustain emotional intelligence, because we have an awareness and we're actually connected to it. And it's how we can go, oh, great, I'm resentful, great, like I'm either going to see where I was up, and I'm going to balance that out. The moment you see where you're up, and you can go, oh, great, we call it, oh, I'm going to take the hit, right? Because we see where we're up, and then nature has actually balanced us out prior before the fall. That's it.
And your up could be in any other area. Like the resentment is coming in where it can, but the balance could be, say, in your career or like somewhere else, not necessarily in relation to where it's showing up. Yeah, right. Interesting.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
So if you're up in, like, really, really up in one area of life, you're going to be down in another area. So it's wisdom to actually bring balance through all of these areas, so that you can be in more of a state of, less emotional volatility, or less personal volatility, and less business volatility, so that you tend to flow. And I call it dancing, like dancing with life,
Yeah.
as opposed
And
to
like, my
constantly,
mind's gone. Oh, sorry, gone.
as opposed to constantly like being in opposition to it and wanting to change.
And then going like really high and then plummeting really down. And I feel like if I'm dancing, I can kind of control where my negatives and positives are. Whereas if I'm like going positive, 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 the universe might be like, go negative. And I'm like, oh, I really didn't want it to go negative there, if that makes sense. So
yeah. And so I like to say, we have to have a little bit of friction and challenge in our life, because challenge is where we actually grow. And it's wisdom to understand that maximum growth actually occurs at the border of support and challenge. It does not grow in maximum support. That creates dependent, lazy motherfuckers. Right? That end up being fat and lazy. And I don't mean fat as in body, but I just mean, like they become lazy and they overconsume, and they don't feel the need to do anything, right? Or be anything. And then we tend to see in that expression that they become more of the ones requiring help in the victim mentality area.
And even if you look at some of the most world renowned like healers, musicians, artists, they've all had like some real shit show that they've had to evolve from. So it just goes to show like that creates strength and it creates character and it creates the ability to actually grow. So that's really cool.
Absolutely. I like to use the analogy is that we have 4 seasons for a reason. That's part of nature. And it cannot be sunny all the time with a constant state of temperature. Even in temperature, we don't know where hot begins and cold ends, right? Or hot ends and cold begins. Like they are what we call the same kind, but different in degree. But we want to keep in that relatively, 4-to-1 ratio where it's life sustaining. But we also require elements of, extreme heat. I go to hot yoga so I can put, I play cause and effect in my own life so that I can actually create the transformation in my own body. So with that conscious awareness, you will. So coming back to your original question, the resentment inside of that relative to your partner, can you see how it's actually assisting the growth in your relationship?
Yeah.
100%. So would you want to change that which you're judging within him to be something different?
No, I actually wouldn't.
No. Can you see how that what you were judging is actually assisting you in some form?
Yeah. Just completely within. He's my opposite completely in all areas. And then when I think about it like that, I'm like, well, because you like value like say finances and stability, that helps me because I don't, and without that I probably would be homeless, you know what I mean? So it's like that balancing act is definitely there.
So that's it. We tend to see that in relationships we have the 7 areas of life, like we have spiritual, mental, vocational, financial, physical, family, and social. And we call the physical, family, and social like the feminine side, and we call the mental, financial, and the vocational is the masculine side. And the spiritual component is the driving force for each person in that. And when a person is not able to create balance within the 7 areas on their own, they tend to find a partner and they become whole in that. And so having that awareness is that if that's what's happening, that's great. And if you want to keep it that way, you want to communicate that with each other, that, this is your accountability and responsibility over here, and I'm going to play on this other side so that we can create a whole family or a whole business partnership or the partnership of us. And you come into awareness with these particular things and communicate with them openly, relative to your values, right? So when we have that, we have conscious communication, and then relationships will flourish. But if there's expectations that for others to be inside of something that is not a value, including the areas of life, then we have relationships that are actually going into entropy, right? And then they break apart. And most couples are so scared of actually losing each other that they won't have these conscious conversations, and because of the fear of losing each other. And that's another avenue that needs to be explored too as well, because that is another whole other conversation. So inside of that, the beautiful part of the resentment is now awakened you to many things to be able to have your relationship grow relative to you as both individuals, but you can see how you're complementing each other as opposites. So you are complementary opposites to each other. And so therefore you're creating a whole. Break you apart, then you're going to have to go and find, empowerment in these other areas of life, and the same with him on the other part, right? So probably wiser to have love and gratitude for where it is today, and then make conscious decisions about how you wish to grow your relationship in the future. Thank you for that question. Thank you for that question. So thank you for everybody for being on, Cody and David and a few others. So if you would love to learn more about the conscious conversations that I love to have and the teachings that we do relative to human behavior and advancing yourself or advancing your business or advancing your relationship, then, you know, I do have the Intel Mastermind program, which is available to anybody who wishes to join. It is a 15 teachings with me live like this, and we have interactive questioning just like we did now, and we go deep into all aspects of human behavior and consciousness and wisdom, and deriving the wisdom and the intelligence from life, but also to give you wisdom and intelligence moving forward with life so that you can be the take ownership over your own life and be able to move forward consciously. And in that state, we end up being in a place of unconditional love. And inside of that place of unconditional love, we become impervious, and we become impervious to what I call assault. So we almost become like a Teflon plate. And I don't mean it without expression. It means that we can weather any storm because we have the tools to be able to ask these deeper, more profound questions and to be able to help ourselves to integrate the challenges that we do experience. And I still have them, but I'm so grateful for the tools that I've learned to be able to take these into consideration when I am confronted with deeper challenges. So if that's something that you're interested in, then the Intel Mastermind program is available, and you can reach out to us and we'll be happy to actually share the information with you on that. So thank you, and we'll see you next week. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Renee.
That's
See ya.
okay. Bye.